Hi, everybody. Linda. You're a firework. And we're going to have fun today. We're going to improve the relationship. So I'm going to stop this song. And we're going to come back. Here we go. We're back. Sorry about that. Try to be clever and it gets in your way. Anyway, welcome to the Compassionate Communication Invitation that we've been having all week for you to begin to change the relationships you have in your life and create ones that you desire and deserve. I'm going to take a deep breath. I'm so thrilled to be here with you, whether you're going to join me now or you're going to join me in the replay. I want to share what I've learned in my 25 years as a therapist, mediator, attorney, Chopra Certified Teacher of Meditation, Yoga, and Ayurveda, and also the author, excuse me, the author of Compassionate Mediation, How to Add Passion to Your Marriage or Compassion to Your Divorce. And we're going to be talking a little bit about compassionate mediation today, along with compassionate communication. And I'm very grateful to Linda Joy and Aspire magazine because last month in August, they chose my book as one of the most inspirational written by a woman for women and also for men. And I'd love to offer you a free chapter at lindacrollbook.com. So getting back to you, I want to show you this elephant. And do you ever realize that sometimes there's something you want to talk about, but it's like the elephant in the room that nobody wants to talk about? So just think about it a minute. Think about a relationship that you're having with someone. It could be your parents, it could be your child, it could be a friend, it could be a coworker, it could be a spouse, could even be an ex-spouse. But think about when you're together or when you think about that person, you're not really dealing with what the issue really is. You're dealing with some stories that you've told yourself. You're dealing with some ways of defending yourself in that relationship. And there is a way to change all that. So sometimes I say people put their problems, they like to sweep them under the rug, but then they become so big you trip over the carpet. So let's not ignore the problems that we have in relationships. Let's face them. But let's learn a new way to face them. And that's where compassionate communication comes in. So my name is Linda Kroll, and I've helped hundreds or maybe even thousands of men and women improve their relationships, starting with the one they have with themselves. And that's really important because the way you talk to yourself, the way you love yourself, the way you accept yourself is a great barometer for how you're going to relate to everybody else in your life. So love is the answer, but it starts with loving yourself. So let's think about that today. Let's take a breath. And the reason I ask you to take a breath is if you're like me, your head is going, you're probably multitasking. You may be thinking of all the things you could be doing. You may be doing some of them, from checking your emails to talking to other people on Facebook to deciding what the rest of your day is going to be like. Or if you're like some of us, you're ruminating, playing it over and over in your head. You're ruminating about a problem with a person in your life. So I'm hoping that by the end of this video today, you're going to learn a new way to be in that relationship. And you'll also learn some ways not to be in that relationship, because how you show up changes the relationship, whether the other person decides to do anything at all. Okay, so a brief recap. This is my fourth day or fifth day of the invitation, where we started with talking about compassionate communication. And what compassionate communication is connecting to your best self, letting go of limiting beliefs, unburdening pain from the past, and relating from your heart. And if you go to Compassionate Communication Community on Facebook, I'm going to have everything posted right there. So if you've missed anything, you can go to Compassionate Communication Community, where I'm hoping we can reconnect and stay connected. And you can get all the past videos that talk about how to be in self, what it means to be in self, And what it means to be in self is you're coming from a calm, compassionate, clear, courageous perspective. I'm an IFS therapist, internal family systems, and Dick Schwartz and all my other cohorts at selfleadership.org recognize self as that essence of who we are at our core. And when we're, quote, in self, we know how to be present without being judgmental or blaming or angry or withdrawn, and show up in a way that invites the other person, whether it's your parent, your child, or anyone in your life, to show up with a little more openness rather than defensiveness. So one way to have compassionate communication is to be your best self. The second way is to let go of limiting beliefs. That's a big one, but you can do it when you recognize that just because you're thinking a thought or having a judgment about the other person doesn't mean it's right. I mean, I know you think it's right, but it may not be totally factual. It may not be relevant today. It might have been true before. But when you can acknowledge that the way you manage your life is sometimes to exile parts of yourself, to push aside the parts of you that are vulnerable or sad or hurt. And you don't want to talk about that. Part of the elephant, heavy elephant in the room. I'm not going to talk about my sadness. I'm just going to be angry, or I'm going to be withdrawn, or I'm going to go overeat, or somebody else is going to go have an affair. There's a lot of different ways that we can exile our parts, try to manage, and then get very extreme. And we talked about that this week, so you can go back and listen to some of the other videos. But when we're in self, we show up differently. So I brought some dolls today. It's corny, but maybe you'll get what I'm saying. Excuse me. We all have an inner child. There we go. We all have an inner child. And it could be two women, it could be two men, but for now I've got one of each. So we've got an inner child. And for instance, when I was young, I have two wonderful parents, but my father, God rest his soul, was a manic depressive, bipolar, which meant that oftentimes there was a lot of spontaneous yelling in my house. And as a child, what that told me was to be afraid of anger, because you never know when it was going to come up. You never knew how extreme it was going to be. I certainly didn't like it in someone else, and I didn't like it in myself. So I pushed my anger aside. And because there was some level of dysfunction in my family, as there is in most families, I grew up to be a very good codependent, meaning on the continuum of caretaking, taking care of other people's needs took precedence over taking care of my own. So I didn't know how to set boundaries. I was a perfectionist. I was a people pleaser. I didn't have the internal awareness of my deservability unless people liked me. So there's a lot of time we codependents spend on worrying what other people think and trying to fix, save, and rescue and putting our needs last. And so that's how I managed. I managed those ways. And then when I'm in a situation or was in a situation where I was triggered to feel sad or scared or hurt or something that my inner child was triggered, and I couldn't manage by doing what I knew how to do or what my ego one thought I should be doing, then maybe I'd withdraw. Maybe I'd eat too much. I'd have different ways to get extreme. And other people have other ways to get extreme. So a lot of times people manage, I found these dolls in a dollar bin. This is what I call my codependent doll. And when I bought her, she looked like this. I mean, exhausted, if you can identify. And when I used to squeeze her, she used to actually say, I love you. It was really funny, but now she's too tired to do that. And guys usually like to try to look cool. So a woman or a man could go either way. But when you have a part that likes to try to fix everybody else or take care of everybody else, and another part that likes to look cool or that they don't have feelings, then what happens is when these parts get tired, guess who comes out? Sometimes it looks like this. You get it? And as a therapist and as a mediator, this is how I often see people come in my office, where they're ready to fight, where the fight's been going on a long time, and all their parts are all over the place. So I'm going to take a breath and I'm going to tell you the story of an amalgam of my clients. And if any of them are listening in and it sounds like them, it's not you. It's an amalgam, but it's pretty typical. So when couples come to see me, sometimes one wants to divorce and one wants to stay together. And I never know which way it's going to go. But we always start with compassionate communication. We start with helping them connect to their best self and recognizing they have a self, that it's not all of the yada yada of he did this, she did that, he didn't do this, she didn't do that, but the process with which they could learn to communicate can really come from a higher self. So when they learn that in the first session, they're also recognizing that just because they have judgments about the other one doesn't mean they're right. And when they learn how to talk with empathy to each other, they can talk about the pain and the sadness and the fear and really put the walls down around their heart and change the filters through which they're judging the other and create a whole new relationship. So that's the best case scenario. But what often happens is when a couple come to see me, it's often a long time after the problems begin. It's often years, sometimes decades. And what that means is wherever you are in your relationship now, if it's having problems, if you're having conflict, you can learn the skills of compassionate mediation, which is compassionate communication, create a compassionate relationship, explore your options, understand your finances, and create the relationship you desire and deserve. But you can do that now. You can learn all these skills now, because what usually happens is I'm sitting in my office here and a couple comes in and I'll talk to them each alone. And as soon as one of them walks out of the office and I'm alone with the other, the feelings come up. They start to cry, they share their deepest truth, but they don't do it when the other one's in the room, because then they're armored, they're walled, they're angry. They're resentful. They're thinking of divorce. They're mad the other one's thinking of divorce. And if I can't help them get to self, I'm just refereeing. I've got, parts flailing all over the place. And as corny as it seems, that's what it feels like. And you know what I mean. You have a part like this. And if you don't have a part like that, you have a part that withdraws and pulls back and does things in a way that your partner probably thinks is passive aggressive and you're just being defensive. So to heal your relationship, you have to learn how to come from your higher self. And when they do that, you can talk about anything. So when a couple's thinking of staying or going, in compassionate mediation, we talk about both. And that's what's different in compassionate mediation versus regular marriage counseling. And there was a show recently, excuse me, there was a show on Steve Harvey about a month ago. And in that show, there was a couple, not unlike the couple I was going to describe in my office. So I'll describe his couple so that none of my clients will think I'm talking about them. So on Steve Harvey's show, there was a couple that she had just filed for divorce. The wife had just filed for divorce from her college sweetheart. And her reasons were that he was distant. He was gone most of the time. She raised her children by herself. And she got to a point where she was done. So she filed for divorce. The husband, on the other hand, had been working diligently to provide for his family, believed that now they could enjoy their time together, and also resented the fact that while he was working so hard, she had formed a connection with someone at work. She didn't have a physical affair, but she had an emotional connection. So Steve Harvey's show brought up split or recommit. And what he ended up doing at the end of the show was he sent them to a 4-day marriage counseling boot camp, which was very generous of him. And hopefully it worked. Hopefully it worked. However, in my experience with situations like these, the wife who was ready for divorce wasn't ready for marriage counseling. She had one foot out the door. And the husband who was so hopeful would probably be disappointed that she wasn't going to be full in. So what compassionate mediation does, it gives a couple a forum so that they can both be heard. So if she wants to talk about a separation or a divorce, he leans in a little bit to make himself available to hear it and share what his feelings would be from himself, his higher self, as she's sharing from her higher self. And then they can talk about everything. Because also in compassionate mediation, you process the feelings with empathy. You learn how to use I messages instead of you messages. You learn how to truly understand someone's words and open your heart to their feelings. And when you do that, even if you're talking about a possible separation or a divorce, miracles can happen, and they do. So don't be afraid to bring out the issues that you're avoiding right now, because if you're avoiding them, 5 years down the road, 10 years down the road, you might be in an office like mine talking about a divorce, and you don't have to do that. You can start talking today. You really can. So let's take a look at what we've talked about this week. The compassionate communication invitation includes being your best self, coming from that calm, compassionate place, which takes some practice, but you can do it. Let go of limiting beliefs. And we talked about how difficult that is to do, because just because we think something, we tend to believe it, but our thoughts aren't always right. In fact, they're often coming from parts of us that are trying to defend us so that we're not hurt anymore. But when we ask those parts, when we actually have a conversation with the parts that are trying to defend us, and I'm back to corny, but it works, and we thank them. We thank them. We thank them for running interference, because these parts of us that look so terrible to the other person are really protecting us. They're protecting us from having to be cool or having to be codependent. And really what they're protecting are those inner children inside that we need to learn to take care of ourselves. So when we're in self, we put our weapons down. We don't have to work so hard to manage our feelings. We learn how to speak for our feelings instead of from our rage. So you can say there's a part of me that's angry that you did or didn't do something. But the truth of the matter is, I'm angry because I'm hurt. And I'm scared that this isn't going to work out. And I'm sad about a lot of things. And when you start talking from your higher self about those exiled parts, your partner or whoever you're talking to can listen without being defensive. Now, it may take some time because they're used to being defensive with you. But if you hold the space for this self-energy, calm, clear, compassionate, courageous, connected, creative, curious, confident, if you hold that space, they can meet you there. And it's amazing what happens. And the other thing you do is unburden pain from the past. And part of unburdening it is to speak for it and to ask for empathy and to ask for understanding and to ask for new behaviors and see what happens. And most of all, relate from your heart. So right here. And what usually happens is our heart has been hurt, and it's been hurt by someone knowingly or unknowingly. And instead of taking care of that hurt, we just push it aside and keep going on and on and on until finally we decide we can't go on anymore. We have to leave. Well, you don't have to leave. You can reboot. You can renew. You can start over. And that's what we talked a little bit about this week. That when you're witnessing the situation, instead of being reactive in all of these parts, when you're witnessing it, you have a whole different perspective. And again, as Wayne Dyer said all week, as I'm quoting, when you change the way you look at something, what you look at changes. So what I meant is when you're looking from your higher self, when you're looking with compassion rather than reactivity, it changes what you're looking at. Because when you see the behavior of your partner or your child or your parent, and you recognize that the reason they're acting out so extremely is because they can't manage all the hurt underneath, then you can find that inner child in them and send compassion, even as you're setting boundaries on their behavior. And it's possible. And then the forgiveness piece is a gift you give yourself. Because when you forgive, you are free. Whether you choose to interact with that person ever again, you are free. It's a gift you give yourself. And then the starting over part is possible in any moment. Excuse me. I share one more time. There we go. Sorry. I shared yesterday the story of someone I love dearly, and I showed up in a situation where I wasn't in my best, and I kind of came at her from apart, and I was able to stop and apologize and forgive myself and forgive her, and she forgave me, and we started over. And what that means is you just start from where you are without rehashing the past, without projecting it into the future, and begin again. And that's what you can do. And as you're doing it, you learn how to create healthy boundaries. So you don't have to be codependent. You don't have to worry about pleasing everybody. You can become the best of who you are and acknowledge what you want and what you don't want and what you're going to let in and what you're not. So doing that allows you to create a whole new dynamic. So you don't have to decide if you're going to split or recommit, because you're not going to recommit to the old relationship. You're going to create something new together, something new that starts with compassionate communication, where you're both coming from your best self, where you both let go of the limiting beliefs and judgments about the other, where you've unburdened pain from your past, either in journaling or counseling or sharing, but you've unburdened it, and then relating from your heart. And I've seen couples in my office where even when one person gets to be more in self, there's a shift in the dynamic of the relationship. And many of them decide to create something new and better together. And when you think about the effect on children everywhere, when you think what it's like for compassionate communication to be the way you relate to your child, to your parent, to your spouse, to your ex-spouse. Because even if you've been divorced and you're in a relationship that's not comfortable, you can learn the skills of compassionate communication and compassionate mediation, and you can bring this self-energy wherever you are. And there's a brief story about someone I know dearly. And when she separated from her husband, she was codependent. So she didn't ask for what she needed. And he came to rely on her lack of boundaries as acquiescence. So when she finally did ask for what she wanted and needed and got it in the judgment, he was very upset with her. And probably had she learned not to be codependent and to ask for what she needed clearly, it wouldn't have gone on so long. But it led to a very contentious post-divorce where he was still angry. And she had a choice. She had a choice to be angry too. She had a choice to be cold too. But she chose to come from self, to understand that her behavior, for which she had made amends, for which she had apologized, had still hurt him at his core. And that inner child in him just didn't want to forgive yet. But she spent a long time just being calm and compassionate. And it took a long time. But he finally was able to speak for the part of him that was angry instead of from the part that needed to cut off. And they began a friendship years after their divorce. So it's possible. And even when you're the one staying in self, it gives your children a field of compassion in which to marinate instead of succumbing to the shrapnel of your words or your energy when it's contentious. So for your children's sake, for your inner children's sake, Learning compassionate communication allows families not to be broken, but to be peacefully and respectfully restructured. And in that restructuring, there's love, forgiveness, compassion, and acceptance in whole new ways that are possible. So I wanted to invite you to download my Compassionate Mediation Toolkit. And what's in my Compassionate Mediation Toolkit? I'm going to put the link up there. It's cmtoolkit.com. And what you get in the toolkit is the first chapter of my book, which explains everything I'm talking about. So it explains how to be in self, how to access self, how to understand your parts, how to relate to your partner with love and compassion, no matter what you're going to do. So the first chapter of the book is part of the Compassionate Mediation Toolkit. Then there's a relationship assessment where you can begin to take a look at your relationship now and focus on the areas that you need to improve, whether it's your communication or your self-leadership or your understanding of your options or the way you resolve conflict. The relationship assessment is going to give you clues to make your relationship better today. And then the third part of the Compassionate Mediation Toolkit is a video series that I did based on my webinar, Should I Stay or Should I Go? 5 Vital Questions to Help You Know. Hi, Mary. Thanks for being here. And I was sharing that the Compassionate Mediation Toolkit has the free chapter, the relationship assessment, and the video series on compassionate communication. And it's based, again, on the webinar, Should I Stay or Should I Go? But even if you haven't asked yourself, should I stay or should I go? The 5 vital questions that you need to ask yourself will help you create a new relationship. So the video series is part of the Compassionate Mediation Toolkit. So I would love for you to share this video, the Compassionate Mediation Toolkit, the Compassionate Communication community, so we can stay connected there. And hi, Jody. Thanks for stopping by. Oh, very cool. It is very cool. Thanks, Jody. And this is exactly my point. Even though, as I've said before, my family loves me, but thinks I'm crazy. That's okay. But what I'm doing is fulfilling a dream. As a 70-year-old grandmother, I am fulfilling a dream. I have been a therapist, a mediator, an attorney. I've had so much education and experience. And it brings me such joy to sit in my office in Deerfield, Illinois, look at a little green light, and know that I'm touching hearts and minds and spirits, and you're touching mine back for wherever you are in the world. Amazing. Isn't it amazing, Lisa? It is. It's so amazing. I'm going to show that, and I can say that. I can show that it's amazing, and I can show that it's cool, and I can show that this is wonderful. And I want to send you to all those people. Go look at Mary's site, too. So, bless you all for being here. And what we did today was talk about the fact that we sometimes have an elephant in the room that we don't want to talk about. And in not talking about it, our relationships not just stagnate, they deteriorate. They become hollow versions of really what our heart desires. So when you learn compassionate communication, when you learn how to come from your best self, let go of limiting beliefs, unburden pain from the past, and relate from your heart, miracles happen. You can see the situation from a witnessing perspective. You can forgive yourself as well as your partner, yourself first. You know we're human beings we're spiritual beings having a human experience. And in our human experience, we trigger each other. And we have to know how to empathize and truly listen and truly respond instead of the ways we typically react. So in learning compassionate communication and in getting the Compassionate Mediation Toolkit, where you can learn the skills of compassionate mediation for any relationship, how can you create a bond between the two of you when the content of what you believe is different? It's not the yada yada of the content. It's really the process by which you open your heart to all the parts of yourself and all the parts of someone else. And you learn that we're all one. As Rumi says, we are not just the drop in the ocean, but the entire ocean in a drop. And Pterodactyl, who stopped by to say hi earlier, I went to her website and she quoted Rumi: seek the wisdom that will untie your knot. Seek the path that demands your whole being. Thank you, Tara, for that. And the wisdom, put it back up, the wisdom that will untie your knot of all those parts that we talked about earlier, all these guys that just get all upset and interact with each other. The wisdom that will untie that is the self inside of you, that space of love and compassion. And then seek the path that demands your whole being. And that path is one of compassion, acceptance, love, and forgiveness. So please learn how to do that. You can get your Compassionate Mediation Toolkit. You can share this video with anyone who might need it. You can even send it to someone you're having communication problems, and maybe they'll learn something too. But if you've learned anything today or want to go to Compassionate Communication Community and see the other videos, from my heart to your heart, I wish you infinite peace, love, and joy in your inner space, in your inner life, in your relationships, in your families, in your communities, and in the world. So thank you so much for being here. I am sending you so much love and gratitude that we can hang out together technologically like this. And I think it's so cool. So I love you. And let's see if I can get Katy Perry's song to play again, because basically we are fireworks. We are beacons of love, and we are channels of love and beacons of light. Okay, go be a channel of love and beacon of light. I'll see you tomorrow on the next day, 12:30 Central on this page. Okay, love you. You too. Bye. And so, see you soon.